the second worksheet, it's not the second tutorial, and we've been building up to this a little bit, but it was important that you kind of got used to the idea of game objects, if statements, the input library, so that when you come onto this and later exercises, you have an idea of what you're looking at in the code. So what this is going to be about is creating prefabs. I might have done this already, but I'm going to show you how to do it again. We're going to add some physics to it. We're going to create different shapes, maybe some materials, and then we're going to generate these objects at runtime. So when the person presses a key, they're going to generate lots and lots of them. So it's kind of a bit fun. So this worksheet is Unity Basics 2, Prefabs and Generating 3D Objects, which you can find in the folder, this one here. So if we go back to Unity, and the first thing I'm going to do is go back into 3D mode. So I click on the 2D thing, and then I'm going to click on the camera. You press Alt, select the game scene, press left Alt to zoom around. So if it just let me do that. You can see I'm on the level of the camera, we're right at the edge of the world, and there's a big mountain range right in front of us. So I'm going to move the camera a little bit. I'm going to move it right over here. So it's kind of right in the middle of the map, and we can sort of see this beautiful creation. Well, mine isn't beautiful, but yours is probably much nicer than mine, I hope. Yeah, and now we're sort of in this sort of range of mountains. If I wanted to turn him around so I can get a better view, I just turn on the rotate tool and I grab the green one here like this, and there we go, we can see our snow covered mountains. And I double click on main camera again, press left Alt so I get the eye, and I can swing around and I can see the mountains. So right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create some shapes, and I'm going to create them at the position where the camera is. So the way I do this is I select the main camera, I right click, and I go down to 3D objects and I create a cube. And you'll see a cube appearing in our game scene. It's right on the camera, so I'm going to move it forward. It's also a child of the camera, which isn't what we want. If something is a child of something else, that means that, like this, that means that if the camera moves around, the cube will move around with it. It's kind of like its parent. So, like for example, if I do that, the cube's going to move, and that's okay for now. But obviously, we don't want it to move with the camera. We want the cube to sort of be a separate object. So I just drag that out of the hierarchy there, so it's its own separate entity, and it's not a child of that. Okay, and then I'm going to create a material. So I go down to create material. I'm going to call that red shiny, and then over here in the inspector I can select the inner one to select the red color, the outer one selects the main color. Then I'm going to make it a bit more metallic. I'm going to first apply this color to the cube like that, and I'm going to make it a bit more smooth as well, so you should see it being very shiny. That you can see there's a little preview of that up there. So if you took a closer look at the cube, I double click on it, if you can see at certain angles the light reflecting on it, you'll see that it's a sort of shiny metallic look. Okay, I'm going to double click on the camera again to zoom in, center it on there, and then I'm going to add the cube to the cube. I'm going to add, so I'll move this over here so you can see it. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the cube. You see it's got a couple of things. It's got standard transform, position, rotation, scale. Then it's got these things, other components called, well, the cube gives it a shape, the mesh renderer, and then it's got a box collider. The box collider is what Unity needs to know that it's a real physical object in the world. So if you run into it, you can't walk through it, or to pick up a collision. So, for example, imagine the cube was a bullet, and you fired it. Well, the box collider will tell Unity that it's collided with something, so you could do something, which we'll come on to that later on in other tutorials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a rigid body. This rigid body gives it physics. So if you don't add a rigid body, let's just show you what happens if I don't have one. So if I press play, give it a second, what's going to basically happen is Unity will try and, well, Unity won't try, it will run, but it will just, the box will just hang up in the midair because it has no physics, so it's not very realistic as to how boxes should behave, or any shape should behave. So in a minute you'll see it switching to the game window because I press play, and you see our box just hanging there in midair. So to make a difference to this, so basically we're going to add this rigid body to give it physics. You need to stop a script from running because we want to make this a permanent change. I could add this while the game is running just to see what happens. Let's do that, and you'll see the box falling with physics. But as soon as I stop and I press play again, everything goes back to the state that it was before the game played, so nothing is saved if I change it during the gameplay. So I'm going to add a rigid body now, and now when I play it, it will fall with physics like it just did. Let's rotate the box a little bit. So I press the rotate tool, I rotate it around its Z-axis, so that's this axis here, and then it's kind of on its side, and I'm going to lift it up a little bit. It's on its side, so when it does fall, it will fall down and then bounce onto one of the edges. So give that a minute. I think my computer's a little bit slow because I'm doing lots of things like recording screens and everything like that, and it's taking a while to process it. There we go. So the box falls down and it hits the floor. So that's creating a box. So we've set that up. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to drag the cube into here. Well, actually, I'm going to stop my script. I'm going to drag the cube into my file window. Stop it. So will it still be there? Yeah, it's still there. I'm going to drag that into there, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to create prefab variant. What a prefab variant is basically a 3D object that we've created that's packaged up with all the things that we've added. So we've added a rigid body and we've added this material. Well, this is like the whole thing now, and what it will allow me to do is it will allow me to connect it to my script so that whenever we press spacebar, for example, we're going to generate lots of these cubes. So one more thing that we need, I'm going to add a new game object to where that cube is. I'm just going to create an empty game object. I'm going to call that position, and then I'm going to make that position separate of the cube. So I'm going to drag it out from that being the child, so it's its own separate entity, and we're going to use this position to tell Unity where to generate these objects. So I'm going to grab that position, and there isn't actually anything there. There's nothing there because it's just an empty game object. It's just a position. Okay, so that's all the things that we need set up. Now we're going